Okay, so I'm Corbett, and I'm a researcher at AAUW. So we wrote a report last year called "Why So Few Women in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics," and this was funded by the National Science Foundation. And what it is it's we did a big literature review of all the academic literature on women or gender in science and engineering, and it's in a lot of different fields. It spans sociology, psychology, some like neuroscience. It's in a lot of different fields. So it was a job to gather that, and then we identified research findings that had the potential to really change the way people understand this problem. Why are there few women here in these fields? And also that are peer-reviewed, well-respected, recent findings. And then we interviewed those researchers, and we wrote about 8 of the findings that are particularly interesting and relevant to this. So, and I should mention also that it was funded not only by NSF, but also by AAUW members who gave generous money for that report. So what I'm going to do today is just talk about the report, and then Erin's going to talk about policy recommendations things that we can do to kind of encourage more women to go into these fields. So first of all, I just want to talk a little bit about the lay of the land, sort of where are girls and women in science and engineering fields. And so, of course, high school preparation is the precursor to becoming a scientist or an engineer. And so here is some data from the Department of Education that shows high school credits earned in math and science from 1990 to 2009. And you can see, so girls are in green and boys are in purple. You can see that in 2009, girls and boys earned equal numbers of credits of math and science in high school. And also, girls and boys are earning more and more credits in math and science in high school. And then on the right is the grade point average in high school math. And again, girls are in green and boys are in purple. So you can see that girls get higher grades on average, and that's been true. That's generally true, that girls on average get higher grades than boys in school.
Why is that? I mean, we're having a conversation. Right?
Yeah.
How do you think that is?
Well, I think that girls are... girls are more. No, well, I mean, the truth is, boys do tend to do better on tests, and girls tend to do better in grades. And so it's not a matter of intelligence. It's girls tend to study more. I mean, when polls show that girls study more, and whether that's nature or nurture, it's hard to say. But girls tend to be more diligent in terms of like doing the work that is assigned to them. So that's what we see, and it's true in science.
All kinds of social aspects.
Yeah,
you tell a boy what to do for homework, and he's going to go, if I want to. And you tell a girl what to do, and say, well, told me to do it, I got to do it.
Maybe. So and I should have mentioned that as well. The findings in this report are all about sort of the social and environmental factors that make a difference, and each of them shows that does make a difference. We can't say that there is no biological component to why there are fewer women in these fields, but what we can say is that there is a social and cultural component. So, hi, welcome.
We're having a conversation this morning.
Yes, it's going to be more informal.
Okay, thank you. Well, and Dr. Rich brought me up here, but I actually am not sure where I'm supposed to be yet. So, you'll pardon me if I step out mid-term. Thank you.
Okay. So the result of this is really that about equal numbers of boys and girls graduate high school pretty well prepared to become a scientist or an engineer. But then once you get to college, that's where you see a real drop-off once kids declare their major.
Back up just one slide.
Sure.
And sorry to be semantic about it, but you say they graduate pretty well prepared. Do you mean pretty well prepared to be a scientist or an engineer, or equally prepared to be a scientist or an engineer?
Well, I'm saying equal numbers of boys and girls graduate well prepared to study science and engineering. I'm not saying the average student graduates well prepared to become a scientist or engineer, but in terms of numbers of girls and boys, who have taken
Okay.
chemistry and
So
physics
it's,
and how.
so it's more equally prepared.
Correct.
Okay.
Then I'm not saying that on average.
Because I look at the other side, and I just was listening this morning, you know, how many students are dropping out of engineering programs because they are not well prepared
Right.
for those programs.
Right.
So,
I'll tell you from the educator side, schools, high schools, as you come into the university, we have gen ed because the high schools are failing ridiculously. And so you have to redo that, and the answer for it apparently is to apply the same metrics that have helped us screw up the high schools in universities. I think it's total nonsense.
of course, that way we'll have fewer failing students from the
Yeah.
K-12.
And one of the things.
And I've been on the local school board for 14 years, so, you know.
Oh, we must have a conversation, because this report looks specifically at gender. So when we talk about, well, preparedness, we talk about equity equal. So
Okay.
there's scoring and test numbers. I'll talk a little bit about how policy-wise we need to do a much better job.
Okay, so
in
this
terms of
isn't
parent
whether or not they're well prepared to be a scientist or be in mathematics, but what the comparison is between the genders.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, it's all in perspective.
So there are what the point is really is that there are plenty of young women who graduate high school well prepared to become scientists and engineers in comparison to young men.
Yeah.
And so, but then when you get to college, you do see a drop off, specifically in these fields on the right, physics, engineering, and computer science. So this chart just shows the percentage of bachelor's degrees earned by women in selected STEM fields from 1966 to 2008. And so as you go from left to right, you can see the increase, like in biological and agricultural sciences. In 1960, 25% of undergraduate degrees went to women in those fields, whereas in 2008, 58% of those degrees went to women. And in chemistry as well, half of the degrees, something that some people may not recognize, but half of chemistry degrees go to women now. And even in math, you know, it's close to half. But the fields that are really still the holdouts are physics, engineering, and computer science. And computer science is a particularly interesting case because women's representation is declining in computer science. So that's kind of a conundrum. It's a lot of people are paying attention to that, kind of looking at what's going on there. So
I don't know if you looked in here because there was a related article. It's on professors and placement in those classes.
oh, really? Okay, yeah, and so here's the labor force, some numbers. Percentage of women in selected STEM professions from 1960 to 2009. So the blue is biological scientists. Again, in 1960, 28% of working biologists were women, and then in 2009, nearly half, 45% were women. And then the green is math and computer science, the purple is chemists, the orange is physicists and astronomers, and then the bottom line is engineers. And so in 1960, it was actually fewer than 1% of working engineers were women. And
I started at Purdue in engineering in 1964.
you did?
Dismal on the Navy side.
Yeah, that's true. I think Betty Shanahan, who's the executive director of SWE, I think she went to Purdue as well.
A number of them.
Yeah, my first boss, I'm an engineer by training as well, and my first boss was a woman who went to Purdue and then transferred to Illinois and got her engineering degree back in the 60s. And yeah, it is a different game. Because people today, I talk to groups of young women engineers today, and they think, you know, nothing's changed, you know, we're still in such a minority, and then other, you know, older women are like, no, it's changed a lot, it's really changed. So, and as you can see, so women are 14% of engineers in engineering workforce in 2009, which is a huge increase, and yet it's still a really small minority.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
So that's that. So this is our report. This is what I already explained to you, kind of what we did and what we're going to type things. So I'm going to just talk about these 8 findings that we talk about in this report that we present. So the first is beliefs about intelligence, and this is research from Carol Dweck, who's a psychologist at Stanford University. And she finds that believing in the potential for intellectual growth in and of itself improves outcomes. And so what I'm going to show here is, so what Carol Dweck's research shows is that in math and science, a growth mindset benefits girls. So she makes a distinction between individuals with a fixed mindset and individuals with a growth mindset. Individuals with a fixed mindset believe that they're born with a certain amount of intelligence, and intelligence is static and is born. People with a growth mindset have a much greater belief in the power of effort to change how intelligent you are, how smart you are. So, so they believe that learning can actually improve your intelligence. And so here are some of the characteristics that go along with a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And what ends up happening is that individuals with a fixed mindset, if they encounter difficult problems or obstacles, they tend to kind of back away from it because they think, oh, if I were really smart at this, it would come easily. But if they have to work at it, they tend to kind of doubt their abilities and go into something else. And it's interesting because a lot of kids who are very capable, who do really well, may have a fixed mindset, and it may actually serve them well early on, for a long time. You can think, yeah, I'm smart. Yeah, yes, intelligence is fixed, and I've got it, and I can do it, But if they at some point, hopefully in their careers or their education, they will run into very difficult problems. If they're really, going to achieve their full potential, you actually want a person to get to the point where they're like, this is really hard, I can't do it, I don't know what to do. And a person with a fixed mindset is much more likely at that point to say, okay, this is not for me. I'm going to go do something else that I'm better at. Whereas people with a growth mindset, when they do run into those obstacles, they're more apt to say, okay, this is hard, and I'm just going to keep working at it until I, learn what I need to learn to get to where I want to be. And so the growth mindset actually benefits everybody, but it's particularly beneficial for girls for two reasons. Girls in science and math for two reasons. One is that challenges are really in the nature of scientific work. So that's what the name of the game is really. It's like solving problems that haven't been solved before. So you're going to run into something challenging in these fields. And then second, stereotypes still exist about girls' abilities in these subjects. And a growth mindset has been shown to protect girls. Dr. Dweck's research shows that girls with a growth mindset are less affected by this stereotype. When it's brought to their attention, they're like, it doesn't matter. I can learn what I need to learn. If I work hard, I'll get there. So that's why this is a particularly beneficial thing for girls. And so in her research, so we make some recommendations. I'm going to talk about recommendations, not specifically policy recommendations like Erin will, but in our report we do make recommendations from each research project that individuals or teachers or policymakers can do to kind of implement these findings. And the first is to teach children that intellectual skills can be acquired. So that's what her research shows, is that a fixed mindset can become a growth mindset. Just teaching kids that you can learn what you need to learn to be successful in any area. That's an important thing to do. And it shows, so what her research shows is that when you do teach that to kids, they do better on math tests, and they're more apt to say they want to study more math in the future. So it's specific, her research is specific to math. And then praising children for effort, and this is something rather than the outcome. So it's really focusing on the process, highlighting the struggle, encouraging kids to really work hard and say, wow, I really like the effort you put into that. I've done this with my own kids. It didn't come naturally. My natural instinct was to kind of praise my kids for when they did something quickly. Like, wow, you're really good at that. Wow, you must be smart. And I've taken that out of my vocabulary. I never, ever tell them that they're smart because Dr. Dweck's research shows that that's not beneficial to the kids. What you want to do is praise their effort and say, I really like how hard you work at that.
I'm not that humble, so they support me.
Yeah. That's right. And she also shows that you want to praise them more for the things that take them longer to do than the victories that come easily to them, because that'll really encourage kind of a love of hard work and an embrace of the challenge. So and I've spoken to groups of women in engineering directors at colleges, and so they deal with a lot of students, undergrads and graduate students, and they have said, well, what about graduate students in science and engineering? How do you cultivate a growth mindset in them? Because they see that even among women in grad school, in engineering, they still kind of lack this kind of confidence that they might have what it takes so that they can learn what it takes. And it's the same kind of thing, you know, encouraging them to believe that they can learn what they need to learn to become excellent in their field. And Dr. Dweck actually has a book called Mindsets that really gives a path to cultivating a growth mindset for anybody who's interested. So that's the first finding that we have found. The second one is on stereotypes. And it may seem like these stereotypes about girls' math abilities, that they're not as good in math as boys, it's something of the past, but it's not. There's a very, very robust field of psychological research that shows that these stereotypes exist and they can negatively affect girls' performance in math. And this is called stereotype threat. You may have heard of it. So basically the idea is that when a stereotype is brought to students' minds when they're taking a test, that suggests that their group, a group that they are a member of, is not as good at something, their performance actually declines. And so this is an example from a test where it was boys and girls. And so in the stereotype threat group, they were given a math test, a challenging math test, and in the stereotype threat group, the students were told boys tend to be better on math. And here you go ahead, take the test. And then in the other group, they were just told, the same test told there's no difference in gender on this test. And you can see the results here. Girls or young women are in green and men are in purple. And you can see that in the group told that boys were better, boys did better. So there's kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's not only been shown with gender. This research actually started on race and ethnicity. And so there's a lot of experiments that show that it happens when students are told that their ethnic group or their racial group doesn't do as well, they don't do as well. And it's been even shown, there was a study at Stanford University where a group of science students were told that Asian men do better than white men, and then the white men's scores were lower in that group. So it affects anybody where there is a stereotype of something, it brings to mind, and it can be triggered by little things. Even being asked to indicate your gender before the test can kind of trigger that in your mind, like, oh, yeah, girls aren't as good at this. So we make a couple recommendations in the report. One is to expose girls to successful female role models in math and science, which is something that lots of programs do. But the interesting thing about this is that it can actually change the stereotypes in our heads, kind of change what we see as normal. So it really is a nice thing that can be implemented, fairly easily to actually make a difference. And then teaching students about stereotype threat explicitly has also been shown to improve performance. So just telling kids that this exists is something that's been shown to make a difference. The third finding is on self-assessment, and this is probably my favorite. And so this research comes out of also Stanford, the professor who did this work. She was at Cornell at the time, but now she's at Stanford. Her name's Shelley Carell, and she's a sociologist. And she first became interested in gender differences in self-assessment when she taught high school chemistry. And she noticed that no matter how well the girls in her classes did, she had trouble really convincing them that they had any sort of scientific aptitude. And in contrast, no matter how poorly the boys in her classes did, they continued to believe that they were very good at chemistry. And so she kind of noticed this anecdotally, and then when she went back to grad school, she delved into it, and she looked at a data set of 16,000 high school students. And she found that, yes, among students with similar past math grades and test scores, boys assessed their math abilities higher than the girls did. So she then decided to test this finding in an experimental setting. Because what she said is she went around the country talking about this, and people would say, well, that's because the boys really were better. It just didn't show up in their test scores or their grades. And she thought, well, I don't think that's what's going on. So she created this lab experiment. And this is an example from her experiment. So does this rectangle have more black or more white? Does anybody want to? It looks even. It is even. That's right. So this was experiment, participants were shown 20 of these kinds of rectangles with equal amounts of black and white, and were asked, does this rectangle have more black or more white? Now, she identified the ability to detect correct proportions of black and white as something called contrast sensitivity ability, which is not, she made it up. Right? And then she told half the group that boys tend to have more contrast sensitivity ability, and she told the other group there's no gender difference in contrast sensitivity ability. And then she had them each answer 20 questions, and she told every participant, you got 12 right. So, despite the fact that they were all told they got 12 right, and the group told that men are better at this task, women assessed their abilities much lower. So then she asked them, how good do you think you are at this? And girls are shown in green. In the group where they were told men are better at this task, you can see there's a big difference in how the boys, the young men and young women assess their abilities. And the group told there is no gender difference in performance on this task. Boys and girls had a very similar idea of how they did. So, in the same experiment then, she asked them, how high would you have to do to think you're really good at this? And here, again, in the group told men are better at this task, women said they'd have to score around 89% to think they were really good at it. Men, on the other hand, said they'd have to score around 79% to think they're really good at it. So that's a 10 percentage difference. And in the group told that there's no gender difference in performance on this task, they both said around 82 or 83%. A much more similar idea of how well they would have to do. So if you think about these findings as they relate to science and engineering, which are considered to be masculine fields, it suggests first that girls assess their abilities lower than boys do in these fields, even in the face of good grades and good test scores. And then on top of it, they hold themselves to a higher standard in these fields, thinking that they have to be exceptional. Or anyway, they think they have to be better than boys think they have to be to think of themselves as good. And in these areas, in any area they're considered to be masculine. So one of the first things in terms of recommendations, we talked about setting clear performance standards. So this was, she was basically when there's uncertainty in a student, they tend to, or in anybody, we tend to fall back on stereotypes to kind of assess our where we are. And so, for example, if you get 50% on a test, that creates uncertainty in the whole student, and the whole student body. I'm thinking of college courses in science and engineering, which sometimes are this way. They have these low test scores or low average, and it's sometimes there's even it's intentional and to some degree to kind of weed out students who they think might not actually make successful scientists or engineers. And so, but what that does is it creates all the students, but it creates more uncertainty among students who already think maybe I don't belong here, like women and like underrepresented minorities who already have a feeling like, oh, there's not a lot of other people like myself here, maybe I'm not in the right spot. So setting clear performance standards, so reminding kids that a B in a difficult course is a grade to be proud of, specifically reminding girls of that can be helpful. And yeah, so that's mainly for educators to be clear with their students, what do you expect of them. And then second, girls are less likely to see their high math and science grades in high school, for example, as an indication that they can become a successful scientist or engineer. So helping them see these grades, that they are getting high grades on average in math and science in high school, and help them see that's not just something you need to do to get to college, but you actually might be a really good candidate to become a computer scientist or a civil engineer or something like that. So those are two of the recommendations that come out of her research. The next one is on spatial skills, and this is spatial skills in the area of mental rotation in particular. This is one area where there are gender differences that we see consistently, that boys tend to do better on tests of mental rotation than girls do. And this research is from Dr. Cheryl Sorby, who's at Michigan Tech. She's an engineering professor, and her research shows that spatial skills are not innate and that they can be improved with training. And so this is an example of mental rotation. So does anybody want to volunteer what the answer is? Just to let you know what we're talking about here. D? Yes, that's right. D. Very good. So what about is, so at Michigan Tech, all incoming freshman engineering students have to take this test. It's actually called the Purdue Spatial Visualization Test. And anybody who fails it, what happens is about 3 times as many girls fail it as boys. Or they're, I mean, given, girls are about 3 times as likely to fail it as boys. For, again, whatever reason. They come to college without these skills as more frequently than boys do. And so, so anybody who failed it had the opportunity to take this course that Cheryl Sorby designed, which is this spatial visualization course. And this started in the early 90s, and she's done it every year. And she finds every single year after taking this course, and she's whittled it down to about 28 hours of instruction. Kids, on average, they're scoring about 50% of the test, and by the end, they're scoring about 80% of the test. And so it works for girls and boys. The reason there's a gender component is that girls are more likely to not do well on this test to begin with. And actually, Michigan Tech has now made this, it's required now of anybody who fails the test. They have to take this class. So, because there was a question about, the kids who choose to go in, are they already more kind of likely to do well because they're self-selecting in, but now she's going to be having this random sample of students. So and actually other universities have implemented this as well. And so one of the recommendations we make is to encourage girls and boys, everybody, to play with building toys when they're young. That helps to develop spatial skills. And mechanical drawing as well is a great thing to do.
Sounds like Montessori to me.
Yeah. And something else is sewing is actually something that really develops one's spatial skills, like quilting, which are typically female activities that really do tap into those skills. So that's the spatial skills part. And by the way, please feel free to jump in at any point if anybody wants to say anything. The next finding is about college student experience. And so all that we've talked about so far has really been about preparing girls, young people for this. But scientists and engineers are really created in college and university. And so here we talk about 2 different research projects that show small things that can make a big difference for female recruitment and retention in college. This chart first shows, this is what I was talking about earlier in the high school slide, is that this is intent to major when students go to college. So this is in 2006. You can see that around 15% of girls go to college intending to major in a STEM field, and most of them are in the biological and agricultural sciences. That's the blue part, the dark blue on the bottom. And then it's close to 30% of boys go to college intending to major in a STEM field. And for them, you can see most of them are in engineering. So the biggest gender differences are the green and the red bars, engineering and computer science. So girls are less likely to go to college intending to major in a STEM field. But that doesn't necessarily mean that colleges are off the hook. There are things that they can do. And first, there's research that we talk about in the report by Barbara Whitten, who's a physicist at Colorado College. And what she did is she compared what she called successful physics departments, which graduated about 40% of their students were women, and compared to more typical physics departments, which were around 20% of the graduates were women. And she compared them to see what were they doing differently. And then the second research project that we look at is Jane Margolis and Alan Fisher. They did a study at Carnegie Mellon in the Department of Computer Science to see, what could be done there, what was going on and what could be done. And so some of the recommendations that come out of those 2 projects is first to actively recruit female students, which may seem obvious, but many departments don't do that. They choose from whomever applies to their department. But to actually go out into the high schools and actively recruit young women to come to your department can make a big difference. And then second is emphasizing the broad applications of science and engineering in introductory courses. This has been shown to increase, it's beneficial again for all students, but particularly for women, they're interested in these broad applications of their major. And I remember when I started studying engineering, I asked my advisor, I would like to know this because I don't know what kind of engineering I want to study. Could I take a course that would kind of give me an idea of what I would do in each of these types of engineering? And he said, well, there's not class like that. All the engineers take Engineering 101. All the engineers take it. It's a computer programming course. It's Fortran 77. That's what I learned. And so I did. I went and I learned computer programming, and then I went on to, you know, many other very technically focused courses, which is how most people earn their engineering degrees. Even today, it's the way most people earn their engineering degrees. But many schools are implementing this. My alma mater, I went to the University of Notre Dame. I know that they have implemented a course like this in part to recruit more women, and many other schools have done the same. So to let people know, what are you getting into? And it's beneficial because it really helps kids make a good choice for themselves and focus on what their career will be like. So that's a recommendation. And then the third one that I want to mention is to consider prerequisites carefully. And this comes out of that study at Carnegie Mellon where they were requiring their applicants for the computer science department to have quite a bit of computer programming experience already when they applied. And of course, this weeds out potentially successful students. More often, women and underrepresented minorities who are less likely to have computer programming experience from right off the bat. So they're not even let in. And they were, of course, going to teach the students how to computer program when they got there. So it's not really necessary. So they were able to revise those prerequisites. The Carnegie Mellon study is very interesting, and it was written up in a book called Unlocking the Clubhouse, which I recommend. It's a small book, and it's just about their study. But the thing is that it was not only a study. It was Alan Fisher at the time was the dean of the computer science school or something. He had a position there where he was very interested in getting more women into his department. So they applied their findings right away, and they were able to see kind of the results of putting these recommendations into practice. So they were able to increase their representation of women by quite a lot, close to 40%. It was around 7% when they started, and it was about 40% again. So those are some of the things that we talked about. This next finding is about faculty, and it shows that women STEM faculty are less likely than their male peers to feel that they fit in their departments. So this is a study that comes out of Harvard University. It's the Collaborative on Academic Careers in Higher Education, and basically it's a survey done. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. It's called COACH is the acronym, and they survey many faculty around the country. This chart just shows where the female STEM faculty in four-year educational institutions by discipline and tenure status in 2006. So the tenured faculty are in brown, and the non-tenured are in blue. And you can see that women are underrepresented in each category, even among non-tenured biological faculty. And these numbers are smaller than you would expect from, like, if you go back 12 years and look at who's getting PhDs in these fields. There are more women than you see here.
This is where you can read it here because they've got to follow it.
Great. That's, yeah. Okay, terrific. There is also some interesting, I'm going to actually look this, I'm going to read this statistic because I want to make sure I get it right. That there's some interesting research on the academic workplace and motherhood in particular. Okay, this is from Marianne Mason and Mark Goulden. So, among tenured faculty in the sciences, 12 to 14 years after earning a doctorate, 70% of the men, but only 50% of the women had children living in their home. So, when you say that word, sometimes I know it's confusing, but you're looking at tenured faculty in the sciences 12 to 14 years after earning their doctorate. Among those, these are people who've gotten tenure, 70% of the men, but only 50% of the women had children living in their home. Okay, second one is among science professors who had babies within the first 5 years after receiving their doctorate, 77% of the men, but only 53% of the women had achieved tenure 12 to 14 years after earning their doctorate. So, and that, they call those early babies, that's what she called them in her study, like if you have a baby right after you get your doctorate, you know, that is what they found was actually the biggest problem for women, or women were most adversely affected. Yeah, it's, so clearly there's still, you know, something about the academic environment, which I think many, you know, probably it has to do with the tenure clock and the biological clock that is problematic for women. I have a question.
in any of these studies, they did, I guess, like a set of questions to these women, asking them if it was a choice they made. I choose not to get tenure because I'm going to I choose the path of having motherhood, but also my career, but maybe I won't get as far in my career because I'm choosing motherhood. Have they done any type of
Like
social?
asking,
Yeah, actually
like,
asking the same women who they study.
Yeah.
Was this a choice for you?
There are, I don't know if that particular question.
Or something like
Well,
that?
it's, yeah, but yes, I mean, people do, there have been studies where people talk to women with PhDs and ask them what's going on, and what they find is that, yes, women are saying, in fact, there was a recent study by National Academy of Sciences last year, I think, that showed that when women apply for STEM positions, they're as likely to get hired for tenure track positions as men, but they're not applying in the numbers that they're getting their PhDs in. And so what it seems like is happening is women are choosing not to go that way, not to try for a tenure track, faculty position. But exactly why that is, I'm not familiar actually with anything that asks, exactly and shows percentages of women who decided not to do that, kind of what the rationale is. I guess the assumptions that people make is that that it does have to do with family to some degree. Yeah.
And I have to say that that's a pretty hot topic in policy fields. It's called, choice, and there's an alternative argument to that called the illusion of choice, which is that a lot of women in making career family decisions, are more comfortable saying that they're choosing to do something as opposed to saying, well, the reason I can't do this is because there's no work-life policy in place in this institution or the field that I chose. And until that time, people like me there will not be people like me in that field. And so it's an illusion of choice, really. So what I think Chrissy's looking at are the numbers, and the reasons are much more
complicated. That's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Right, because that whole notion of choice is just fraught with, people don't make choices out of thin air. They make choices out of what is presented to them as a viable option. And so when they see what the academic tenure path is like, and they also know that they want to have a family. So I suppose that is a choice, but at the same time, it's a choice that's really informed by what their options look like.
The process is a dialect. It's not a linear, I choose this.
Yeah.
And somebody else is in power.
Right.
The choice argument is used often to keep women from asking for things that I'm going to talk about, which is Title IX equity in university institutions which receive federal funds. These are arguments that actually should be happening that aren't.
It reminds me of the book that I've been reading called Opting Out. And it's not specifically about academics, but it's about high-achieving women who I believe they got their MBAs from prestigious universities. And this study looked at women who had left the workplace. And it's a small percentage. Most women don't leave the workplace when they have kids, but some do. And so it was really looking at why did these women leave? They were so well prepared for their careers, and when it came out of it, almost all of them did. It was about the workplace. It wasn't like there's this pull that they really were wanting to get home. It was that they couldn't work it out. They just couldn't do what they needed to do to be as involved in their family and also stay in their jobs.
I would like to add something in the academic environment. Many times women, when applying to a position, you look at the composition of the department you're applying to, and when you don't see a single woman as a staff, as neither tenure or non-tenure as a research faculty, that is telling you something.
Right, that's a good point. Yeah. So, a few of the recommendations that come out of the Kathy Trowers, the researcher at Harvard Center, provide mentoring for junior faculty. Again, that can be beneficial for men and women, but it's been shown to be particularly beneficial for women. And mentors don't have to be women. Men can be great mentors findings I'm going to talk about have to do with bias. And this, again, is research that comes out of Harvard University, and Dr. Mahzrin Banaji is the researcher whose work we looked at and who we interviewed. And what she finds is that in a test of implicit bias, most people associate science and math fields with male. And so this research is really interesting because you can take part in it. You can actually go online and take this test anonymously. There's a lot of these implicit association tests, and I'm going to give you the URL right there, implicit.harvard.edu. They have a lot of these tests that, like I said, gender in science, but there's gender in the workplace. There's a lot on race. There's a lot on age, on religion, on weight. You know, there's these implicit biases that we have. So then you just take this test, and it'll give you your results right away. You know, it just takes like 15 minutes or 10 minutes. And you'll see like, oh, you know, even though I don't think I have these biases, I can see that my brain is doing something for me, you know, that I'm not really aware of. And so, so what this, so we recommend that you take these tests to learn more.
I can tell you on the semi-objective side from the online university, we have no differences in terms of race or sex, because it's totally blind.
You don't know, right?
That's the hypothesis. It's selective based, but our stats are indeterminate.
Yeah. Right, and there's a study that's well known, like Claudia Golden, about the blind music auditions, and when people didn't know if it was a man or a woman auditioning for orchestras, once they put up like a screen so that you couldn't see them, women's representation in orchestras went up quite a lot. And so yeah, it's an interesting study. So, and then taking steps to address your biases. These are the harder parts. Oh, and this was what I wanted to just share with you. First of all, these biases are not, they're true for men and women. And I can tell you my own biases that I've learned about when I was working as an engineer. I would have to call vendors sometimes for technical information about something for my application. I was designing satellite components, and I remember distinctly being on the phone with this heater vendor, trying to get some information. I was in a hurry. I needed technical information, and there was a woman talking to me on the phone, and I found myself just getting more and more annoyed and impatient, and thinking, I wish she would just send me to the guy who can give me this answer. She's not going to be able to answer my questions. And it's very interesting because here I was a woman engineer, assuming that the woman on the other end of the phone was not technically competent, and I did not believe that women were not technically competent. I believed I was a capable engineer. Nonetheless, there were this is my unconscious mind clearly held this belief that, I was unlikely that this woman would be able to help me, and they were better at that. And so not only was I the object of gender, of implicit bias, I was also, the instigator of gender bias. So it's something that, and that's what they find in all these studies. There's not a difference in the participants. There's no difference among the men and the women in terms of the bias that they have. Everybody has it. So, or most people have it. I mean, there's some varying degree associated with taking these tests. It shows you kind of the breakdown of respondents. But there's not a gender. It's not like men are biased and women are not. It's not that way. So, and then taking steps to address your biases. That can include just learning more about female scientists or putting pictures up of women in non-traditional occupations, which may seem like kind of a silly idea, but actually Mahzrin Banaji, the scientist, she finds she has these biases, and there's an interview on the Scientific American website with her and Alan Alda talking about this, and she says that she had these pictures in her office because it can actually change the way of what you think of as normal. It can change your brain when you see people doing things that you don't normally see. So. And then the last finding is about bias against women in non-traditional fields. And this is research by psychologist Madeline Heilman at New York University. And what she finds is that women in what are considered to be male jobs are viewed as less competent than their male peers. When women are clearly competent, then they're perceived to be less likable. So this, of course, can be a problem because both competence and likability are really useful in the workplace for success. So this can be a problem for women in science and this chart shows what I'm talking about. The women are in green and men are in purple. And on the left, you see these are measures of competence. So when participants were told that men and women were equally competent, they were judged to be, they were successful, they were judged to be about equally competent. But when they just said, here's a man and here's a woman in this job, you know, what do you think, how do you think they are, how competent do you think they are? Participants judged men to be significantly more competent than women. Now, over on the right, you can see that when men and women were described as being, well, we don't know how good they are at their job, but they're in this male job. On the very far right, the participants judged the men and women to be equally likable. But when they were described as successful, that's where you see that men were judged to be quite a bit more likable than women. So this is a tricky thing. In terms of recommendations on what you can do is to really just raise awareness that this bias against women in STEM fields or any masculine field exists. And this can be particularly helpful for women in these fields to know that if they do encounter disapproval, that it's likely not personal, that there's this kind of general...
I mean, my first response to this is it identifies potential feedback loops, because if you go back to high school when girls perceived they weren't as good and held themselves to a higher standard, if you've got an employee in the mixed work area that feels that they aren't performing to their ultimate, they've got to try harder, they're probably going to be less socially interactive and therefore liked less or judged less.
Right.
So I can see multiple feedbacks that...
Yep. That's true. Yeah, so that's what we're trying to get at, kind of a big picture of like what are all the things that are going into this, these small numbers, you know, because yeah, I think that's a good point. And then again, creating clear criteria for success is important. So making transparent what the requirements are, because as Madeline Hammond's research shows, when and performance is ambiguous, people judge men to be better at these what are considered to be masculine jobs. So to be very clear in terms of for employers to be very clear about what they expect from their employees, the criteria for success, and transparent evaluation processes. Also, it's helpful for anybody who's subject to bias, including women in these fields. So those are the fields. Those are the 8 findings that we talked about in the report, and there's more details. You can download the report at this URL, and they're not long. They're like 4 pages each, but they're still quite a bit more detailed than what I find out today. So if you're interested, and then Erin brought a few copies, I think, over there. There's also executive summaries over there. If anybody wants it, you can contact me at this email. And then,
Erin, we got about 20 minutes.
So Erin's going to talk about policy recommendations.
Hi, I'm Erin Prangley. I've been with AAUW for about 6 months now. Used to work with 2 senior members of Congress, had my own law practice, did a lot of important stuff, and nothing as important as what Christy is doing at AAUW in gathering the science and information and the data that policymakers need to make informed decisions about the laws that we all live under. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. So Title IX. 40th anniversary of Title IX is next year. So for those of you in the room who are less than 40 years old, you have to put yourself into time capsule and recall there was a time before Title IX. Whenever I think of Title IX, I think of Billie Jean King, but that's just me. I don't even know why, other than she was the tennis player who took on Bobby Riggs in a very famous tennis match when Bobby Riggs said the end one. Billie Jean King took him out of hands. The rest is history. But when other people think of Title IX, maybe you're not thinking of Billie Jean King, you might be thinking more of Serena Williams. That's a little bit better. But in 1972, we go back. In 1972, Congress changed accounted for about 43% of all bachelor's degrees in any majors. In fact, there was only 0.7% of engineering majors were women in the 1960s. There were many more single-sex colleges pre-1972, and in many women's colleges, they didn't even offer engineering as a major. So women had limited access to these programs, and co-ed colleges even limited the enrollment of women. Before 1972 in Title IX, there were caps on the number of women admitted into certain college programs, which may come as a surprise again for some. But again, in 1972, that all changed. Congress sought to prohibit sex-based discrimination in federal funding for all educational programs. And that included all educational programs, K-12 and post-secondary levels. This caused some major changes in higher education. Many of the all men's colleges found themselves open to women now, or merged with sister schools. And historically, co-ed schools opened up all of their academics and athletics to women. And the caps, of course, on the number of women allowed at schools were eliminated. So, who's the face of Title IX today? Okay, so I just put another tennis player up there, Serena Williams. Because, sure, Title IX's impact has had a huge, and in fact, one of the biggest civil rights success stories in our country is the impact Title IX has had on women's athletic participation. In 1971, 8% of high school student athletes were women. But by the 2009-2010 academic year, 41% of high school athletes, that's over 3 million girls, were young women. But going into the 40th anniversary of Title IX, my job today in the next 5 minutes is that I want you all to remember that the intent of Title IX goes well beyond the playing field. So when you think about Title IX 40 years later, this is the face that I want you to remember, or faces that I want you to remember. You're going to help me spread the word that the face of Title IX at 40 looks more like one of these Google Science Fair winners. This past year, more than 10,000 students from 91 countries participated in this Google Science Fair. And the 3 students who ultimately won in each of the age categories did some amazing things. One determined which marinades produced future carcinogens grilled in food. That was Laura Hodge, she's 14. Another helped people with asthma. That's Naomi Shaw, she's 16. And the third improved ovarian cancer treatment for people who have built up resistance to a common type of chemotherapy drugs, and that's Sherry Bowes, who's 17. These 3 girls are the product of 40 years of federal education policy, and that's what we call Title IX today. I'm going to talk a little bit about that hypothesis, and hopefully you'll all be on board with me by the end of this presentation. So, Title IX, it's very simple, and I have the words up here, but I'm going to read them. No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So, to ensure compliance with this law, Title IX regulations require that any institution of education receiving federal funding has to evaluate current policies and practices, adopt and publish grievance procedures, and a policy against sex discrimination. This is probably not that radical of an idea to most of us in this room, anyone under 40 for sure. But I have to say that this is a pretty radical idea even today. Even though girls' participation in STEM courses have unquestionably increased since the passage of Title IX. Before Title IX, many opportunities to advance in these fields were limited. In fact, we talked about the caps that some schools have been having on the number of women who were in certain fields. Title IX does not require quotas for proportionality. That's one of the misconceptions. There are no quotas required in Title IX, but simply put, Title IX reviews ensure that women are not being discriminated against. So, this slide came out a little bit different than I had before. I actually had this on Swee's letterhead, so there was some problem in translation. We work very closely with a group called Society of Women Engineers, also known as SWE. And they allowed me to use this
slide, with permission, to illustrate a very important point about the educational environment and the points in which Title IX can affect the climate for women, to make it a better climate for women. As you can see here, the 4 big dots kind of conceptualize the academic environment. In the middle, there's the engineering education climate, so that's what all these 4 dots are affecting. The myth is that Title IX is only about athletics, but really Title IX applies to every aspect of federal funding and education programs, including admissions, the educational process, hiring and employment conditions for faculty and other employees, sexual harassment, safety, pregnant and parenting students, and employees. And also athletics. So I'm going to keep Serena, all the girls and all. I have to say, Mia Hamm would have been a better person for me to relate to. These outer circles are things that can be that are included within Title IX that can affect the engineering and STEM education climate. So the point of this chart is simply to show that Title IX is more than athletics. So the next chart will show you what I mean by that. The Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Education monitors Title IX compliance in all areas of education. And as you can see, Title IX does in fact permeate all areas of education. The red circles represent the institutional obligations under Title IX. So every institution must have a Title IX compliance officer. Policies related to Title IX and grievance procedures must be noticed, and everyone needs to know about them. They need to know who their compliance officer is, as well as what the policies are. So these are quite basic obligations, and sadly, most institutions do not meet these obligations very well. So, how many of you were in college in the last 40 years? Okay. Did any of you know there was a Title IX compliance officer that you could go to if you felt there was some problem with either the admissions process, faculty, or any education processes that were not really nice to you?
There was an ombudsman, but their job was usually to defend the university. So the problem abroad, their job was to go figure out how to frame it and say, oh, there's really no problem here.
So that's a problem because the Title IX compliance officer usually is not supposed to have that role. And so the Office of Civil Rights and the Department of Education would be very interested in that, but yeah, that's a problem. So let's just talk really quickly. I'll actually skip this. As you can see, the admissions process, recruiting people, you look to recruitment. Are schools recruiting men and women equally? And Christy touched on that a little bit. Preferences, do you look at the admissions? How many people admitted, and the numbers here are men and how many are women? Does that show a pattern of or practice of some type of discrimination? And that applies to all these different areas. Okay. Why women? Why now? So we're talking a lot about women in STEM. Why are we talking about women in STEM? Why is this important? This quote is from Dr. Rebecca Blake. The White House just had a huge Women in the Economy briefing 2 weeks ago, and in fact, I'm going to spill the beans, and next week they will be honoring champions of change, women in STEM professions. So why are we looking at STEM? Why are we looking at women? Why now? Dr. Blake explained that when we need more highly trained workers in STEM fields, we cannot afford to have half our population seriously underrepresented in these occupations. So the small number of women and girls in these fields has a significant impact for our economy. There's a rising concern about the declining scientific inquiry and shortage of American scientists. The U.S. outsources work to and imports scientists from many countries to try to meet the needs of American competitiveness and innovation. In fact, by 2018, 1.4 million computer specialist jobs are expected to exist in the U.S. labor market. But U.S. universities will only produce enough graduates with the computer science degrees to fill 29% of these jobs. But fortunately, or unfortunately, we have this huge untapped pool of potential workers, women and underrepresented minorities who really haven't had the access or haven't been encouraged or recruited to the extent that men in our population have been into these fields. Another reason why women, why now is, quite frankly, pay equity. You see a lot more women heads of households now. There's an increased demand for women to earn more money. Careers in STEM provide women with solid economic security. In general, women with a college degree will earn more than women with this credential. And jobs in these fields simply pay more over a career than other fields. For example, a woman working as a computer scientist or a systems analyst earned on average $56,000 a year in 2008, while women working as an administrative assistant, a traditional field for women, earned a mean annual wage of $31,000 a year. So recruiting and maintaining women in STEM is important to our economic security for women, but it's also vital to our stake in the global economy. Another slide from Sweet. So here's my Rosie the Riveter. And everybody remembers Rosie the Riveter when we did our country's call on women in the past, to fill the needs in non-traditional women's fields. Sweet Society of Women Engineers believes that women can do this once again. And I just think that's great that they have that visual. But Sweet has already known this. It's a new world. But seriously, politicians are putting a lot of pressure into mining our human resources to find the next generation of STEM workers. Even in lean times, budget proposals include STEM training. The White House has several initiatives. Educate to Innovate, which is a 2009 national campaign that partnered philanthropy, business, corporate, to bring $206 million in financial in-kind support to promote student interest in science and math. Now, not specific to women, many of these corporate and philanthropic organizations have been influenced by the works of several people, including AAUW, to focus specifically on recruiting and retaining girls into these fields. Federal funding for education in the form of competitive grants has also encouraged schools states to develop curriculum which emphasize STEM. You've heard a lot about Race to the Top, which is the educational initiative in competitive grants to provide best models and practices. They give preference to districts, to states that will provide STEM training. And one other thing that the White House has done recently, which is very exciting, is this the National Science Foundation Workplace Flexibility Policies. Somebody asked before, is it a choice? What goes to choice? What if a woman chooses to leave? That's her choice. Well, under Title IX, you can see things kind of differently. Certainly there were engineers who were women before Title IX. I like to refer to them as the Ginger Rogers, not my quote, the Ginger Rogers engineers. Somebody once remarked that, yes, people say Fred Astaire was the best dancer in history, but his partner, Ginger Rogers, did everything he did, only backwards and in heels. So pre-1992, there were certainly some amazing women in STEM that did amazing things, but they were doing it with all these obstacles in their way. They were doing it backwards and in heels. The pulls on biological clock that we talked about, the pulls on societal norms and understandings of where women should be. Those were obstacles that needed to be chipped away at, and that's what Title IX is trying to do. And so this NSF, Suresh, I can't remember his last name. He's an incredible person, and his vision is to mainstream workplace flexibility, family flexibility, workplace throughout the entire agency. So some of the things that he's doing is he's allowing the postponement of grants for childbirth and adoption. So grant recipients can defer their awards for up to 1 year to care for their newborn. They're also granting suspension for parental leave. So grant recipients who wish to suspend their grants to take parental leave can also do that. This is really great. They're providing supplements to cover research technicians. I think about mothers, trying to balance the needs of newborns with working in a clinic environment. We're doing amazing things for us. How do they balance that with picking up their kid at daycare? Or what if their child gets sick? Suresh is implementing some new money funding for research technicians to cover for some of these jobs. Yes. Oh. Anyway, they're doing a lot, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. But also on the Hill, legislation, our members of Congress have also done quite a bit in the past few years to encourage and increase the workforce participation in STEM. Specifically to women, the American Competes Act, which was reauthorized in 2010, included provisions that improve opportunities for women. They improve teacher recruitment and training, which include things that Christy's already talked about, how to recruit and train women into the STEM fields. It provides funding for SMART grants, which are grants to further women's interest and participation in STEM fields. These grants are awarded to students pursuing a degree within topics in their 3rd or 4th year of their academic program who maintain a 3.0 grade point average. They also have, through the reauthorization of education laws, they have proposals that have come up to include STEM priorities within any grants framework. So there's an 800-page bill sitting in Congress right now, and part of that bill is preparing students for success in the global economy. This will give money to states who want to utilize programs to attract and maintain students into the STEM field. So everybody's focused on this, and at the agency level, I talked a little bit about the Department of Education Office for Civil Rights, which is the federal agency responsible for ensuring that Title IX compliance in all these institutions. And they've been fully funded for the past few Congresses. So there is will there. Is it enough? I don't know. I think there's a lot more need to do more, and that's where community involvement comes into play. This White House and Congress, continue to draw on the members of the academic communities and businesses and philanthropic communities to promote and spread the word that this STEM initiative is important. AAUW supports women in science, and it goes way back. In 1920, our members raised $156,000 to help Nobel Prize-winning scientist Marie Curie purchase 1 gram of radium for her experiments. And since 1888, AAUW has provided more than 90 million fellowships and grants to 11,000 recipients. This year we gave $3.7 million to women to prepare research for publication and advance their careers. We also do some programs. On the right there are our Buffalo Tech Savvy program. Tamara Brown started this, and it's now in its 6th year, and it's a one-day conference for girls who come together to study the endless opportunities that are provided through STEM careers, and that's held at the University of Buffalo. And in addition, for 14 years, the AAUW California Tech Track has provided math and science camps for girls at major California universities, including Stanford, Davis, and Irvine. So many of in the bottom picture right there are a couple of the speakers at one of our recent conferences, women who attended these conferences and contributed for their decision to go into STEM fields. So thank you for allowing us to present on this important topic, and I don't know if we have any time, but
because these things are backed up to each other, I think we should probably take any conversations offline just to them out. But I'll tell you, I'm a librarian. I'm on the other side of this as a male and female position and in the female field. Some of the inversions are interesting because as a manager, I really have to think about the male-female ratio. It's not casual. There are some differences in this time and place to keep it fully online. So I'm just starting to think about some things. Thank you. That was great. I'm sorry we had to rush so much.
Okay, and please, there are copies of the executive summary